Today I want to share with you another of my most productive habits that helps me to save time, energy, and money. Of course, I'm talking about meal planning. So if you would like to know more about how I meal plan and prep to help me reach all of my productivity goals, stay tuned. Hello my charmed ones, and welcome back to my channel for another video. And if this is your first time with me, I'd like to say welcome. My name is Alexis, but I'm also known as MissTrenchcoat all across the internet. I'm an online entrepreneur who designs and sells productivity tools, strategies, and skills to help you manifest success with less stress. So if that sounds interesting to you, I'll leave some links down below in the description box where you can check out more of my work online, and feel free to download some of my latest free productivity tools over at thecharmedshop.com. Okay, so if you're wondering what meal planning is, I'm going to give you a rundown of what it is, my process, and the tool that I use to help make my meal planning and meal prep a success every week. So meal planning is essentially the process of pre-planning out your meals or your menu for the week, all of the food you're going to make or eat in a week, or up to a month. So I know there are some people who do menu planning for like a quarter at a time. Personally, I go week by week. I know that some people do monthly as well because they grocery shop monthly for like a big family, and that might be just what's best for their schedule. So do what works for you. I just do weekly personally because I do think that when you're trying to plan for a large period of time, sometimes like tastes change and cravings change. So on a week-to-week basis, I will plan my meals out for the week, and I will also do a weekly grocery shop and a weekly meal prep. Now, the concept of meal prep is a little bit different than meal planning, although for me, they go hand in hand. Like I don't do one and don't do the other. So I would recommend doing both or doing some form of meal prep if you're not going to be like me and do all of your meals on Sunday. Like I cook all of my meals on Sunday, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and snacks. Or usually snacks are just things that I kind of have just ready. But breakfast, lunch, and dinner is already pre-made, portioned out, put into the refrigerator, properly stored, and then eaten throughout the week. Okay, so I think that that's probably a really good overview, just a nice general overview about what meal planning is and what meal prep is. Now I want to answer some frequently asked questions. So I did go ahead and on Instagram, I asked my audience if they had any questions about meal planning that I could answer for them. So if you're not following me on Instagram, make sure you do so at MissTrenchcoat so you can follow along in the behind the scenes of my productivity, life, and business and get previews for content like this that are coming out. So let me go ahead and read you through some of the more interesting questions that I think pertain to meal planning or meal prep. So someone asked, how do you freeze meals individually? So I personally don't do freezing of the meals, right? So there are some people who in their meal planning, in their meal prep, they actually do what is known as freezer meals, which means that they prep a meal to a certain point and then put it in a freezer safe container and then put it in the freezer to store so that they can bulk create meals and take them out of their freezer, defrost them, and cook them as necessary. Now, personally, that's not what I do. I don't really necessarily think I need to do that, mostly because, like I said, I don't like to plan for too far in advance for myself because my tastes might change and what I'm craving might change. And also, I don't have a very big family to feed, right? So I don't have children. I don't have a lot of people that I'm responsible for cooking for. So I do find that a lot of people who do freezer meals are people who have a lot of mouths to feed. And so it's easier for them to save time and money by bulking a lot of meals that then end up being frozen. But like I mentioned before, I make all of my meals for the week. So once I've prepped all my meals for the week, I will store them in the refrigerator in proper storage containers. And that's another question that I was asked as well, was how do you keep your food from spoiling when you cook once a week and then you eat it for the rest of the week? Now, like I said before, I put everything into the freezer and I practice really good food safety practices, right? So when I make a big batch of something for dinner, let's say I make like a shepherd's pie, right? It'll be in a container, like in a casserole, and I will have it properly like stored with like a Tupperware sort of lid on it. And then throughout the week, as I'm eating that, I will take fresh utensils and I will scoop out the amount I need and then just reheat that. I think some people might think that they just like reheat the whole casserole and then put it back in the fridge and then reheat and put it back in the fridge, but that will cause food to spoil. I just make sure that my meals are properly stored, right? And as much as possible, they're in containers that are either individual or things where I can easily portion out what I'm going to eat. For example, this week I have chicken parm. I made like a whole bunch of individual chicken parms and then they're stored in like Tupperware refrigerator containers. And then I take out like one or two and nuke them in the microwave, and that way everything else stays good. So I know a lot of people get weird about the subject of food and are afraid like if you leave something out or if you leave something in the refrigerator that it'll go bad. That's never been my personal experience, right? If you leave a gallon of milk in your refrigerator, obviously it's going to spoil after a certain period of time, but I also keep my refrigerator always set on a very low setting, so things are a little bit colder in my fridge, which means that they spoil less often. And also, something that ends up causing food to spoil, like something like dairy products, like milk or like cheeses, is because you might not be using the best practices of hygiene when you are going to, use those ingredients. So if you were to drink out of your, this is just kind of gross, like a milk container, right? I hope I'm not grossing anyone else out. Leave me a comment if this is totally gross. But if you drink out of a container, right, of milk, let's say, and put it back in the fridge, right? That will end up spoiling much quicker than if you're someone who takes it out and pours it into a glass the way that I might, right? And the reason is because your mouth has bacteria, you're putting it on the lid of that, gallon jug or whatever it is. And then what happens is that bacteria multiplies and it mixes in with the milk, and that's what causes food to spoil, right? So once food has been properly cooked, okay, and this is just to my best knowledge, my experience, once I've properly cooked food and then stored it and then executed proper hygiene for making sure that I'm always using like clean utensils and not leaving it out of the fridge for too long for it to like, maybe get warm again, right? Because something like my chicken parm, if I were to leave that out for the afternoon in warm weather, it could absolutely spoil faster, right? But it has been fully cooked, right? So you're not going to leave, as long as you're not leaving the chicken out like on a surface, right? It's always going from safe container to plate, right? Things like that, just using common sense and really good hygiene practices. I've never had food go bad. In fact, I sometimes have extra food and it'll go into like 2 weeks. Even things like I make these bulk egg bites that are just like the Starbucks bacon and Gruyere egg bites, and they're so good. And I can store those for 2 weeks, like no problem. They're egg. They're kept in the refrigerator. I take out the amount that I need and then I heat those up, right? And again, maybe my refrigerator is some sort of miracle from God or something like that. I think it might just be a little bit colder than the standard refrigerator is, but I've never had a problem with food spoiling in like a short period of time, right? Yes, absolutely. I've left things in the fridge, in the back, in the Tupperware container for heaven knows how long, and they've turned green, right? Like it happens, but not after like a week or two. Absolutely. That's never happened to me personally. Another really great question I got was the best time to go grocery shopping. So obviously the time that you have to go grocery shopping is going to be dependent on your personal schedule, but I find that earlier in the morning or later in the evening are the best times to shop. Personally, I end up going around dinner or right after dinner time on Fridays. You guys, no one is at the grocery store at 5 o'clock, like 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock on Friday. Like they're just not, it's so empty. So that's personally when I do my grocery shopping so that I can meal prep on a Saturday. And if something goes over, something goes wrong, I still have Sunday to also meal prep because I am someone who's very vigilant about making sure all of my meals are done before the start of the week. So I personally like going eat later in the evenings on a weekday, but you could also go very early in the morning and you'll be fine as well. Also, look into any sort of food delivery services. I know a lot of grocery chains actually have like food delivery. I'm thinking like, is it called Peapod by Giant might do that. Also, a lot of grocery stores will actually, you can actually send them like a list, I guess maybe online, of what you want. I have a girlfriend who does this, and she just drives by and they load the grocery into her car and she pays for it obviously, but she tells them what she wants, they pick it for her. And that's a major time saver as well. So if you're someone who feels like grocery shopping is a pain, maybe you have a lot of kids, maybe it's a pain in the butt to bring them to the grocery store, I can totally understand why that might be overwhelming. Look into either the delivery services or the ones where the grocery store will actually pick the food for you and package it up, and then you just pay and leave, right? So I definitely would recommend that as a time saver for grocery shopping. Another question I got is how to make sure that you have a lot of choices throughout the week so that you're not making the same food over and over. So obviously, I think that depends on what your personal tastes are. Now, I personally love to make a bulk amount of meals. Like I said before, this week I have a whole bunch of chicken parm that's like ready to go. And that'll be a meal for like at least 3 nights on my menu plan. And I have no problem with eating the same things over and over. But if you're someone who has to have something different for dinner every night, then absolutely just menu plan and make different things. Now, something else I do want to bring up as well is that something to save time and money that makes it a little bit easier for the process so that you're not making like 7 individual dinners is a lot of times what I'll like to do if I feel like I don't want the same thing every night for dinner, which very rarely happens, is I might pick like 1 or 2 meats, like, or proteins, because it doesn't have to necessarily be meat, but you pick some proteins and then you can adapt different variations of that protein. So for example, I could buy myself a big batch of chicken breasts, right? Like a bulk thing of chicken breasts. I could turn those chicken breasts into chicken parm. I could turn them into chicken cordon bleu. I could turn them into like an orange chicken. I could do barbecue chicken. Like there's so many different ways. I could do like a chicken, like a taco, sort of like Southwestern Tex-Mex sort of seasoning. There are so many different ways I could treat that chicken, but I'm still buying 1 meat in bulk maybe, right, for the whole week, but I'm flavoring it differently and then maybe adding on like a few different side options so that, you know, maybe you have like 1 Asian inspired night, 1 Italian night, right? 1 like French inspired or, you know, European inspired night. So whatever that, you know, is for you, right? You can always take 1 protein and then style it a few different ways. That's something that I will often do as well, especially if I'm trying to save money, because there's nothing better than having to buy like 1 big bulk of something and then you can just season it different ways and it feels like you're having a different meal. Here's a really good question I got that a lot of people end up asking me. It said, how do you keep it interesting when you're meal planning? So when it comes to the topic of like meal planning, meal prep, I think a lot of us are curious to see what other people eat. Because when it comes to the things that we might personally eat, unless we're like spending a lot of time researching new recipes and are someone who likes to cook or dabble in the kitchen, you most likely make a lot of the same meals over and over and over again. And I can totally see how that can become boring, right? And maybe what you make over and over every night might be different than what I make. So you want to see like what I'm doing. Maybe it's helpful for me to see what you're doing because we want to keep it interesting, right? We want to keep our food choices fresh. The thing about meal planning though is that just like not meal planning, right? The only way you're going to be able to keep your recipes interesting is by putting extra effort into choosing recipes, dabbling in the kitchen, learning new ways of cooking, right? There's a difference between the process and this time management strategy really of meal planning and meal prep and the idea of becoming like a better chef, right? Or someone who's able to cook better or has a repertoire of different meals that they can cook under their belt. I'm definitely in the same boat as you guys. I am someone who will eat a lot of the same foods and it does feel boring, right? But the point of meal planning isn't necessarily that I'm trying to turn myself into a gourmet chef, even though I will say I am much luckier than many people are. I grew up in a family that was excellent at cooking. Very often I can just come up with recipes and cook things like on the fly, which is really awesome for me. But that's secondary to the process of time management and the process of meal planning and prep, right? Although I might be good at coming up with like a new recipe for myself and dabbling in the kitchen, the point of meal planning is not necessarily to add interest to my food. The point of meal planning is to save me time. So it's always going to come down to you spicing up your meal prep in the kitchen or your recipes in the kitchen by doing your own work, researching, maybe watching television shows, watching YouTube videos. And someone had asked me as well where I might get recipe inspiration from. I like a site called allrecipes.com. So All Recipes is a place, I think they do have a app as well. So if you're someone who's looking for new recipes, I like that website because you can choose by like meals by like categories and meats and like dietary preferences and things like that. So you have a lot of different ways to search for new meals. So let's say you have some extra chicken breast and you're like, I'm looking for like a new way to style this chicken breast to make it more interesting for me. You can go there, search chicken breast. You'll be able to find some new recipes to test out. But I like All Recipes as a really good reference for recipes. Like I said, I'm someone who normally I can literally just like kind of whip things up in the kitchen, but every now and again you need like a recipe to work off of, and sometimes I'll use their recipes usually to reference to make sure I'm doing something right. Sometimes I just don't remember if I'm doing something right and I just need to check. So I like All Recipes for that. Another question I got is how to plan for a single person. And this was a two-parter. So I'm gonna start with how to plan for a single person versus a family, I guess. Now, I think that if you are a single person or if you're someone who has a family, I think you have an idea from maybe cooking meals for yourself or for your family, how much people eat, right? And the dietary restrictions that you might have in your family versus your own personal dietary restrictions, right? So when it comes to meal planning for yourself, you can absolutely meal plan for yourself and you'll just create portions that work for you versus if you're meal planning for a family, you might need to take other people's dietary preferences in mind. You might need to take, in mind different quantities of food that you'll need to make. So that's really the only difference between meal prepping for yourself or meal prepping for like a family. Is just, I guess, like the quantity of food that you'll be making and the specific recipes that you might be making. And then the second part of that question actually had to do with like meal ideas that did not involve pasta. So this is again one of those things where like I know that I am very lucky that I'm someone who has been raised around cooking and food a lot, that I know how to cook a lot of different things, but obviously there's more to eat out there in the world than pasta. In fact, although I'm very Italian, I very rarely eat actual pasta. I either use a pasta substitute like a spaghetti squash or zucchini noodles or sweet potato noodles with one of those like spiralizers. You can make your own sort of noodles, or there are other things to eat than just pasta, right? So like meat and veggies, potatoes, soups, really the sky's the limit here. So I think this is just an example of maybe you might be in a rut with the sorts of foods that you are skilled at cooking. So you may just want to maybe take a gander at All Recipes and try building up your skill, because again, the skill of cooking really doesn't have very much to do with the topic of meal planning. It's kind of like two different sorts of realms here that we're talking about. But if you are someone who feels like they're out of recipe ideas, definitely check out a site like All Recipes and get some inspiration. Another question I got was, what are some of my easy go-to meal ideas? Now, I'm not actually going to answer this with actual meal ideas. I'm going to answer this with the philosophy that I take for my menu planning and meal prep. All of the recipes that I make, right? Although I'm a very skilled cook, right? I am incredibly lazy and I like things to be very simple, very minimal. So all of the recipes that I make for myself, breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, etc., are usually like only like 2 to 4 ingredients, and then you add maybe seasonings, right? So I think the most complicated thing I've been making recently are those Starbucks egg bites that I mentioned before. I am thinking about filming the process. It is really time consuming because it is a multi-step process to like do a fake sous vide, because I don't want to do real sous vide. So yeah, even though I am a really good cook, like I do know how to cook more complicated meals and like a different variety of meals, everything I make is very simple. It's usually like a protein, a vegetable. It might be in the winter soups. I make a lot of things that are like Italian, like a chicken parm, a sausage parm, an eggplant parm, literally the same recipe, like with just 3 different proteins or main ingredients in there, and you have like a different variety of food. I do also like to cook with an air fryer and a slow cooker. So this is also a little bit of a tip for you productivity wise. If you're someone who has a lot of meal prep to do, if you're interested in this topic, when I do my meal prep, my oven is one unit of cooking. And I make sure to use like those really big pans that actually like maximize space in my oven so that I can actually like put food everywhere. And I also will usually use at least one other cooking device. So it might be my air fryer, it might be my slow cooker. If you're someone who has one of those instant pots, you might be able to use your instant pot and create some meals and then store them. But essentially, that is how I actually get a whole bunch of cooking done in a very short amount of time. It only takes me 2 hours to do my meal prep for the entire week. And that's with my oven going and, like I said, like a secondary cooking item going as well. Okay, and next I want to talk to you guys about the tool that I've been using to help me streamline this entire process. And if you have not heard yet, I have put together my own master meal planner. So this is a dedicated meal planner with inserts to help you do everything for a year, 52 weeks of meal planning and recipe organization so that you can streamline this entire process with the help of one tool. So right now I'm going to go ahead and give you guys a walkthrough of the Master Meal Planner, show you how to use it and how to integrate some of these ideas that I've shared with you. Okay, so now I want to walk you through the spreads and how to use the Master Meal Planner, a 52-week meal planner and recipe organizer. Okay, so the first portion of this meal planner are the master meal lists. So this is where you can go ahead and list out all of the meals that you are able to make and then categorize them for breakfast, lunch, dinner, snack, or dessert, okay? So we have this categorization, we have a list, first of all, just so you can kind of remember when you're doing your menu planning, what meals that you like to cook and things like that. And then we categorize them so when you are going to do your menu planning, you can actually just kind of like search down a row and see which ones are ticked off and know that, okay, these are breakfast, these are lunch, these are dinner, these are snacks or desserts. Makes it so much easier for you when you're doing your meal planning to just have everything in one place, but not feel the need to like have to keep everything broken out. Now you do get, I think 10 pages of these master lists. So that seems to be a lot of room for some people, I'm sure. But the idea for you is that you would be able to create lists based on categories that you might need for your life. Now, as you can see here, I have some pages filled out for myself, just like meals that I make, and they've been checked off. But let's say you're someone who is part of a family and some people might have certain allergies to food, right? So maybe you have some gluten intolerant individuals that you also have to cook for, right? So maybe you will make like a meal list for everyone who's like non-gluten-free, and then you can make another list for gluten-free, or you can keep individual lists for people in your family that you might cook for, or keep your recipes organized by any sort of category like vegan, dairy-free, nut-free, whatever things might apply to you. You have plenty of room to add to these meal lists and categorize them as you see fit. So, like I said, you get plenty of pages of that. And then you get to the weekly meal plans. So here you can see I've got my meal plan for the week. Now on the left side of the spread, what you actually have is a grocery list. So the intention for me is that you can make your grocery list here while you're doing your menu planning, your meal planning, and you could just take this whole book with you to the store and you could check off your groceries and you know what you're making, and you also have recipes in the back, you know, so that you can keep all the information for what you need for each of your meals in one place. It makes it so much easier. I really wanted this to be not just a yearly meal planner for you, but something that really helped make meal planning and meal prep really easy. And for me, there's nothing more inconvenient than having to go searching for recipes on things. So I like the idea of having it all in one place. So obviously here you're going to get 52 weeks of meal plans with a grocery list. And I think this grocery list is big enough for most people to be able to add all of, you know, the food they need to purchase, the items they need to purchase for a given week. And this is the area you will have for your meal planning. So you can see we've got this broken out by breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snack. Snack can also be dessert, whatever you consider that. And then it's broken down by Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Yes, it's a Monday start, but feel free to start at whatever day works for you. If you're someone who plans for Sunday start or something like that, no big deal. Now, you have enough room here to list out each meal for each item of the day. And you even have the ability, which I think is really good. These are pretty big boxes. So let's say that you do your meals and maybe your children's meals as well, and they might eat something different than you. You can totally just create a division in the box and put like what you're going to eat here. So let's just say dinner. Let's say the kids are going to have pizza and nuggets, and you're having filet mignon. This is actually my meal plan but for the week, but that's just to give you a little example that you could, very easily just divide out these if you need to make more than one meal for yourself or for someone else, and they have to be different. So you could easily divide these up. So these are plenty of room to list out the menu plan for your week. Like I alluded to earlier, at the end of this book, you also have recipes. Here we are. Okay, so you have a dedicated section where you can put your recipes, right? And here, I'll show you a blank one first. So we have like just a simple recipe spread here and a notes page in case you need some extra note areas. So I've already, like I said, already started kind of filling this out for myself. And the intention here is not necessarily to copy over all of your recipes into this book, right? Because I think for many of us, we might remember our most frequently made recipes anyway, but I think this is a great place to organize recipes that you kind of just always like sort of forget the ideas for, or maybe new recipes that you want to try out. An example that I have written here is this keto muffin or keto bread that I make for myself. I always forget how to make this. Doesn't matter how many times I actually do it. I always forget. So I have the ingredients here, the steps for how you actually make it. And then I also have variations on this recipe that I do. So I use this basic recipe to make like an English muffin. I can make like a cinnamon sort of like sweet muffin for like breakfast or a snack. I can make a chocolate muffin. I even do like a lava cake sort of a thing with this recipe with like cocoa powder and caramel sauce. So there's a couple of different ways. Actually, you know what? Once I even made like Red Lobster Cheddar Bay biscuits with this recipe too. Like there's so many different ways. I should write that in actually, so I don't forget. The Cheddar Bay biscuits. Yeah, so this is one recipe that I can do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, at least 5 different ways. I'm sure there's even more ways, like by eating, adding fruit or something like that. But so the idea here is, like I said, again, not to necessarily copy over all of your recipes, but for things that you know that you're making a lot and you may not remember what goes into them a lot of times, it's great to have the ingredients here so that when you are doing your meal planning, you have an accurate list of what groceries you need to buy, right? And if you're not sure, you can always just refer back to the recipe. Again, so the idea is you can actually take this with you to the grocery store, and it's very helpful because let's say you go to the grocery store and let's say you wanted to make chicken parm, but you're looking at the chicken options at your grocery store and you're like, actually, that's not going to work. I don't like these options, or maybe you don't like the sale or whatnot. You could then switch that to maybe like sausage parm or eggplant parm, right? And then you don't have to worry about it, right? Because you are able to easily just switch things up, substitute things as necessary. You've got your recipes on hand, so you don't have to stress about it, right? You don't have to be on your phone in a huge grocery store trying to get connection. I don't know about you. Do you guys get connections on your phone in a grocery store? Because I never do. So it's always important for me to know what I'm going into the grocery store for, because I can never pull up recipes on the go. So now moving forward, I have my entire meal planner that I can actually just take with me to the store, make it really easy. Just kind of like sit this in your cart, check things off as you go. I know many people are going to really like that aspect of this meal planner. So that is the Master Meal Planner. I hope you find this to be an excellent tool to help you to streamline your time management when it comes to meal planning and prep. Like I said before, meal planning and prep has helped me not just save time and energy, but also money. I think overall it is one of the best productivity strategies you can actually execute on. So I hope this tool helps you to really learn and master this process and make it second nature so that you are able to plan and prep your meals easily for your family, your life, whatever your needs may be. So that is how I meal plan and prep, and a walkthrough of my new tool, the Master Meal Planner. And I will leave a link down below where you can pick up your own Master Meal Planner, or feel free to give it as a gift to someone that you know is very busy and can use the idea of meal planning and meal prep in their life. I would love to hear about how you are using it, so please make sure to keep in touch with me. Send me some pictures on Instagram if you're using the planner. Shoot me an email, leave me comments down below. I'd love to know how you're using it and how it helps to save you time, energy, and money as well. If you have any questions about this process, make sure to leave me a comment down below. And if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to give it a thumbs up and feel free to share it with anyone you think will find it helpful. Like I said before, for more of the behind the scenes of my productivity life and business, make sure you're following me on Instagram at MissTrenchcoat. And if you're not yet subscribed to this channel, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button for more awesome videos by me. And until next time, bye-bye.